Hey guys, tonight we trudge into the misty dawn at Teotihuacan, where the first pale light spills over the massive Pyramid of the Sun in lazy waves of gold and rose. You probably won't survive this sunrise without at least one yawn, but let's be honest, you're here for copal smoke, not cardio. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let me know if you're watching from New York or that mysterious town you can't pronounce. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As the sky brightens, you stand at the base of the pyramid, an imposing structure built around 200 CE, once the largest religious monument in Mesoamerica. Mainstream archaeologists date its construction to roughly 1,800 years ago, when Teotihuacan was home to perhaps 125,000 souls. In the thick dawn air, you inhale the acrid scent of leftover embers from last night's vigil. A fringe theory whispers that the priests mixed hallucinogenic herbs into the copal resin to heighten their visions. Historians still argue whether these psychoactive blends were truly used or are just colonial tall tales. You feel tiny against those worn stones, each block the size of a couch carved by hands that never saw steel tools. Modern asides tingle your ears. Can you imagine lugging those rocks uphill without a forklift? Me neither, jokes on us 21st century snack carriers. A sleepy laugh escapes you as a flock of white-winged pigeons flutters overhead, their cooing mingling with distant drum beats, echoing from the Avenue of the Dead. You probably won't catch the beat if you snooze through the next 10 seconds, but that's part of the charm. Imperial worship meets ASMR snooze button. Off to your right, silhouette figures materialize the dawn patrol of priests, robed in linen sakbes woven with bright red ochre. Each one clutches a woven basket brimming with golden yellow lumps of copal, the sacred resin harvested from distant pine forests. Fringe sources claim some wild copal trees grew only near underground caves, the so-called tears of the earth. But mainstream accounts place most groves within a 2-day camel-free trek from the city. Historians still argue whether that resin trade spurred Teotihuacan's early wealth, or if it merely symbolized status among priestly elite. You join the silent procession across sun-warmed flagstones, your sandals clicking like a disrupted metronome. Every footstep sends up tiny puffs of desert dust, reminding you that not everything here is polished perfection. Modern archaeologists still debate whether Teotihuacan's city planners used advanced surveying tools or simply winged it based on vanishing horizon lines. Either way, those straight roads and massive plazas make any modern city grid look amateurish. Talk about ancient city planning flex. The priests pause at a shallow stone basin carved into the plaza's edge. You lean in nose first, catching a hint of pine and smoke, soothing, reminiscent of your grandma's holiday candles minus the weird cinnamon overload. One priest kneels arranging 3 palm leaf fans beside a small circular brazier. Another pours handfuls of copal onto already glowing charcoals, and instantly delicate curls of white smoke unfurl into the fresh morning sky. The aroma is sweet and lemony, yet with an earthy backbone that makes you think you should be wearing a headdress. Joke number 2, you probably look more like you're collecting recycling bins than conducting sacred rites. That smoke isn't just for show. Mainstream records confirm Teotihuacan's incense ceremonies were pivotal in state rituals, symbolically linking the earth and sun through ascending plumes. But fringe investigators suggest the priests timed the fires so the smoke literally reflected sunlight rays, creating solar halos at certain times of year. Historians still argue whether these optical effects were intentional or mere happenstance. A gentle wind ruffles your hair, carrying the incense far across the city's rooftops. You trace the drifting plume as it coils toward the residential compounds, imagining families inhaling it as they prepare maize porridge for breakfast. Sensory detail floods your mind, the scratch of sandaled steps, the chewy warmth of copal resin between your fingers, the playful tease of sunlight dancing on granite walls. And somewhere behind you, the echo of a conch horn sounds joke number 3. You might confuse it for your neighbor's car alarm if you're half asleep. As you settle into this ritual rhythm, the city's heartbeat slows around you. Merchants haven't yet unloaded their goods, and children remain tucked in adobe nooks. Only the priests and you share this sacred window perched between night's quiet hush and day's clamoring bustle. In this moment, you sense a connection that spans centuries, an ancient priest lighting copal at dawn, and you, an unlikely spectator drawn into the fragrant mystery of Teotihuacan's morning rites. You wander off the broad plaza and slip into the network of low, flat-roofed compounds, a maze of painted walls and narrow corridors that whisper of Teotihuacan's secrets. You probably won't find a helpful map here. These streets were laid out with mathematical precision around 100 CE, aligned precisely 15.5 g east of true north to mirror celestial paths and the movement of the sun. But in practice, you veer left when you should veer right, like ordering takeout in a language you barely speak. The air here still hums with the memory of 125,000 inhabitants at the city's zenith, each one tuned to the same solar calendar that dictated everything from temple ceremonies to market days. As you trace your finger along a faded mural showing nobles and craftsmen, each figure rendered with elongated eyes and elaborate headdresses, you realize that nobody knows exactly who built this sprawling city. Mainstream archaeology credits a series of indigenous groups who coalesced here, but fringe theories insist extraterrestrial architects drafted the master plan on golden tablets hidden beneath the pyramids. Historians still argue whether Teotihuacan's founders shared a single cultural identity or represented a cosmopolitan melting pot of migrant farmers, traders, and itinerant artisans. So go ahead and argue with them next time you catch a webinar that promises real answers. Drifting past the ruins of what was once a bustling marketplace, you notice a carved stone depicting a figure holding a smoking censer, likely an early sun priest, hands raised in ritual offering. You almost expect to hear a booming voice, "Bring me more copal," but instead there's only the echo of your own footsteps. Mainstream sources record that sun priests held supreme status, controlling both spiritual and economic flows, since incense rituals funded by tribute deliveries kept the state treasury flush. Historians still argue whether these tributes were mandatory taxes or voluntary donations to curry divine favor. You pause before a residential compound painted in vivid red and black, imagined as an apartment complex for priestly families. A quirky rumor suggests high-ranking priests lived with jaguars in adjacent chambers to prove their closeness to the sun god. Modern animal rights advocates would faint at the mental image. Of course, this fringe tale collides with more sober evidence excavations uncovered. No big cat paw prints, only trays used to grind pigments and small caches of jade masks, possibly worn during ceremonies. Behind those compounds, ancient workshops reveal kilns for pottery. The sun priest's influence even extended into daily lives. Colossal urns stamped with solar glyphs once held maize beer used in dawn feasts, a mainstream fact that ties agricultural cycles to religious calendars. You take a slow breath and imagine the fizz of fermented corn on your tongue. Joke number 1, you probably wish someone handed out beer here at 6 a.m. instead of coffee. Yet no modern caffeine stands exist among these stones, so you'll just have to rely on memory. Winding between fallen columns, you find a narrow tunnel leading underground. A conduit scholars believe connected the Pyramid of the Sun to subterranean chambers. Fringe explorers maintain this tunnel hid secret archives of priestly knowledge. Star charts carved into obsidian panels, now lost to looters. Historians still argue whether these passageways served as literal pathways to the underworld or as symbolic wombs for ritual rebirth. So pick your source before you take a spelunking tour. Above you, light filters through broken rooftops, dust motes swirling like incense smoke. You pause and breathe in deeply. There's that lemony citrus tang of residual copal drifting through time, mingling with the earthiness of adobe. Joke number 2. If only your morning breath smelled this exotic. In the silence, the city feels alive, as if walls themselves whisper stories you can almost understand. You notice, too, signs of sudden collapsed charred wooden beams and claw-marked stone evidence of unspecified conflict around 650 CE. Mainstream consensus pegs this shift to internal strife, maybe a coup by rival priestly factions. But fringe commentators claim a foreign invasion toppled Teotihuacan, citing odd metal fragments found in rubble. Historians still argue whether those bits were trade goods or leftover meteorites that fell during a solar eclipse. Gathering your wits, you lean against a sun-bleached pillar and reflect on how the sun priest's role evolved here. Once a mediator between humans and gods by the city's later years, he morphed into a political kingmaker, his incense rites a tool of statecraft, rather than pure devotion. Joke number 3. Imagine a government official today calling a press conference dressed in linen robes and red ochre makeup. You would definitely subscribe to that channel. As the sky brightens further, you realize you've only scratched the surface of Teotihuacan's mysteries. The Sun Priest's story intertwines with the city's rise and fall, carving an imprint in pigment and stone that still beckons you forward. You step back onto the open road, ready to follow incense trails toward the next secret, because in this city, every corner hides another question waiting for debate. You trudge along a narrow mountain trail, the morning sun warming your back as you ascend into pine-cloaked highlands, some 40 miles from Teotihuacan's stone streets. This trek has been used for centuries. Copal resin was already prized here by 300 CE as a sacred offering, and you can almost hear the echoes of ancient caravans laden with woven baskets clinking against llama bells. Mainstream records confirm that copal came from the Bursera species tapped like precious tree sap and carried by traders into the city's bustling plazas. Fringe theorists, however, whisper that Teotihuacan priests harvested a now-extinct golden copal tree whose resin glowed at dawn. Historians still argue whether that mythical tree ever existed or is purely the stuff of dreamers. You pause to catch your breath, the slope steep enough to make modern hikers groan, let alone those in simple sandals. Each step kicks up a fine dust of crushed pine needles, scenting the air with a resinous sharpness that tingles your nostrils. Joke number 1, you probably won't win any mountain climbing awards for this trek, but hey, at least your Fitbit thinks you're heroic. Somewhere overhead, a lone hawk circles, eyeing the trail as if to judge your progress. You wave up at it because you're polite like that, even though it's clearly bored of human drama. The forest here feels ancient, trunks thick with lichen, and leaf litter so dense your boots sink in with each step. You spot the first copal grove squat trees with scaly bark and branches thick with sticky yellow droplets. Tapping begins at dawn, when tree sap flows most freely, an observation that blends practical knowledge with spiritual symbolism, since dawn itself was sacred in sun priest ceremonies. Fringe accounts claim that some priests used obsidian chisels to carve sap channels in secret patterns. Historians still argue whether those inscriptions were mere graffiti or encoded prayer glyphs. A local resin harvester emerges from behind a cluster of trunks laden with a leather satchel half full of rough copal chunks. His weathered face cracks into a grin as though surprised to see an outsider. He offers you a smooth nugget the size of your thumbnail. You handle it gingerly, feeling its warm, almost waxy weight, and inhale deeply. The aroma is sweet but piney, with a hint of citrus peel undercut by earthy musk. Fringe enthusiasts swear this particular copal variety induces lucid dreaming when burned in certain ratios. Historians still argue whether dream incubation was an intentional priestly tool or just good storytelling. You ask the harvester how he collects the resin. He points to a series of V-shaped cuts on a nearby trunk, classic taps made with a small dugout stick rather than metal. In mainstream ethnobotanical studies, this bark scraping method is praised for allowing trees to heal between seasons, ensuring resin for years to come. Yet, you spot one trunk that looks dangerously wounded, a deep gouge that might kill the tree. Joke number 2, apparently, not all copal trees believe in self-care. As you follow him deeper into the grove, he plucks a pointed rock from the ground and demonstrates a delicate slicing motion against the bark. Golden beads ooze out and collect in a leaf cup at the base. You mimic the motion, awkwardly tossing resin onto your sandal rather than into the cup. The harvester chuckles softly, and you wonder if he's laughing at your dancing feet or the fact that you thought this would be easier. The playful jibe reminds you that despite the ancient spectacle, you're still a clumsy tourist in sacred woods. He then takes out a small bag of maize, a humble snack to keep energy up. You share a handful, the kernels surprising you with their powdery sweetness. Mainstream texts note that harvesters often combined light grains with syrupy copal to soothe gums after a long day of work. A quirk that led to the fringe legend of copal corn treats, supposedly eaten by priests to attain temporary solar visions. Historians still argue whether that custom was real or just colonial exaggeration. Continuing on, you cross a shallow creek bed strewn with reddish stones glinting in the sunlight. These stones were once core samples of resin, judged by harvesters for purity. Those reddish stones fetch the highest prices in Teotihuacan's market, a mainstream fact reflecting the city's complex tribute economy. You pocket one small pebble, promising yourself a place for it on your bedroom shelf as a souvenir or an artifact only you will appreciate. Joke number 3. Future archaeologists will marvel at the ancient relic your cat knocks behind the sofa. Suddenly, the harvester stops at a cluster of younger trees. He touches the resin with a fingertip and tastes it just a pinch. You recoil at the idea, but he insists you must try it to truly understand its significance. The resin is bitter at first, then slides into a sweet finish that sticks to your teeth. You can't help but laugh at the sticky novelty. It's like chewing on raw honey minus the bees. Through your laughter, you sense the centuries of ritual condensed into that single taste, the connection between earth tree and human ritual that fueled Teotihuacan's ceremonial heart. You sit cross-legged on a mossy rock watching resin collectors trim the trees in silent rhythm. The early light filters through branches, casting moving mosaics on the forest floor. You close your eyes for a moment, inhaling copal's full complexity, sweet, woody, citrus-tinged. And imagine that same smoke rising above the pyramid of the sun, coiling into the sky like a golden pathway to the heavens. Scholars still argue whether those rising plumes were meant to carry prayers, drive away evil spirits, or simply signify the coming of a new day filled with ritual obligation. As you rise to return, your satchel holds enough copal to fill 2 small braziers, enough for a week of early morning offerings back in Teotihuacan. Your legs ache pleasantly. A reminder that every historical fact comes with a cost in sweat and sore muscles. Modern asides whisper that you're unlikely to maintain this hiking routine beyond today, but the memory of pine sweet air and sticky resin will linger long after your sunscreen wears off. You step back onto the dusty trail, a bundle of sacred resin in hand, and a head full of timeless ritual. The forest seems to wave goodbye, needles rustling like departing whispers. With incense destined for sunrise ceremonies, you feel part of something bigger than yourself, and you haven't even lit the brazier yet. You slip back into Teotihuacan just as the first chanting echoes across the plaza. Your arms heavy with copal, but your spirit light with anticipation. You probably won't breeze through the initiation process yourself, but now you witness would-be priests arriving at the foot of the Pyramid of the Sun, robes swept tight around their shoulders. Mainstream sources describe a months-long apprenticeship beginning in adolescence, when young novices learned astronomical lore, calendrical calculations, and ritual choreography. Fringe whispers claim they also endured sensory deprivation in dark chambers to commune with the sun god. Historians still argue whether those solitary trials actually happened or are later embellishments. Two towering statues flank a rough-hewn staircase. The legendary twin guardians carved from greenstone, their expressions frozen between reverence and warning. You sidle past them, trying not to trip over stray obsidian flakes. I know graceful you are not. Apprentices line up in pairs, each clutching a woven jar of freshly ground copal dust mixed with tiny jade beads. You can almost hear the crackle of impatience in the air as they await their turn to present before the master priest, who emerges from a fluted stone doorway, wearing an elaborate headdress of quetzal feathers. His presence so commanding, it makes you slump lower to avoid eye contact. The initiation begins with a series of scholarly recitations in Nahuatl ancient speech, rooted in the heart of Teotihuacan. Novices chant the solar calendar's 260-day cycle in unison, voices rising like incense plumes. Mainstream linguists have deciphered these chants as mnemonic devices combining numbers for sacred days, but scholars still argue whether the exact syllables held hidden meaning beyond simple counting. Joke number 1. You probably thought your morning affirmation routine was demanding. Try memorizing 20 glyphs in an extinct language. Next comes the fringe trial blindfolded. You're led through a narrow stone corridor lined with slick obsidian knives jutting from the walls. Legend insists that only the chosen ones make it through without injury, guided by the sun's warmth, seeping through cracks above, a symbolic test of divine favor. Historians still argue whether such a perilous rite ever occurred, or if it's a dramatized account from colonial-era storytellers. You breathe shallowly, realizing you're glad it's happening to someone else today. Once past that gauntlet, novices kneel before a low brazier where seasoned priests kindle coals to glowing red. Each apprentice scatters their jar of copal dust across the embers, tiny golden clouds erupting in a fiery hiss. Mainstream records note that the priesthood prized fine-grained copal for its rapid, clean burn, while coarser chunks smoldered for slower libations. Joke number 2. You probably didn't think resin had a grain size chart, but hey, welcome to priest life intricacies. The master priest steps forward, dipping a palm fan into a bowl of scented water. Lavender wasn't on their menu, but perhaps marigold or vanilla extract from distant trade routes. He flicks droplets over the smoldering copal, causing sudden flares of steam and scent. This infusion ritual remains debated. Some argue it represents the merging of earth resin, water, fan, and air smoke to honor elemental harmony, while others believe it was purely theatrical flourish. Historians still argue whether the water scent step was standard practice or added by later generations for show. Now comes the final act. Each novice, one by one, must recite a solar invocation while wafting incense toward the sunrise, ensuring the smoke's trajectory aligns with the pyramid's central axis. You watch them sway gently, arms carving arcs in the air, eyes fixed on the glowing horizon. Mainstream depictions confirm that successful ritual performance granted the initiate a notch in their linen sash, a public badge of rank among priestly circles. Fringe commentaries suggest some received secret codes stitched into their fabric, unlocking hidden chambers. Historians still argue whether those clandestine messages existed or are modern myths. As the last novice completes the chant, the master priest raises both arms, drawing a hush over the crowd. In that sacred silence, you feel the weight of countless generations condensed into a breath of smoke. You likely won't get your own badge today, but the sense of witnessing a rite older than most modern nations fills you with unexpected reverence and a gentle urge to yawn. You step onto the wide stone causeway known as the Avenue of the Dead, its broad expanse stretching nearly 2 miles north-south, flanked by low platforms and sacred shrines. You probably won't mistake this for your local jogging trail engineers aligned it with the rising sun during equinoxes around 200 CE, ensuring dawn light split the corridor in perfect symmetry. But today you navigate it like someone debating their morning to-do list. Left, right. Question everything. Modern asides remind you that this grand thoroughfare predates many European cathedrals, yet you stride across it in flip-flops, so much for respectful footwear. Joke number 1, you're out here risking soul blisters in the name of history. Along the beaten stones you pass plazas dotted with stepped altars and statues whose true meanings remain as elusive as your motivation to climb more pyramids. Mainstream archaeologists date their construction to Teotihuacan's heyday between 250 and 400 CE, a period when the city thrived as a cultural and trade hub. Fringe theories, however, claim these platforms hosted gladiatorial-style battles beneath the gaze of foreign dignitaries. Historians still argue whether bloodsport ever featured in Teotihuacan's ritual calendar, or if that's a sensationalized import from Roman lore. You pause at a shrine engraved with a repeating motif of the solar feline, a stylized jaguar with sunray whiskers. The priests here once left bowls of copal at its feet each dawn, believing the feline spirit would carry their prayers skyward. You crouch to peer into one such bowl, half buried by centuries of dust and pigeon droppings. The faint scent of resin still clings to its edges, tickling your nose like a forgotten candle at Christmas. Joke number 2. You probably didn't expect bird guano to play a role in your spiritual journey, but hey, surprises keep you awake. Continuing onward, you notice on your left a row of columns capped with abstract carvings, possibly tomb markers for high-ranking priests. Mainstream sources confirm elite burials line the avenue's perimeter, complete with grave goods ranging from obsidian blades to shell gorgets sourced from the Gulf Coast. Fringe aficionados insist some tombs hid underground tunnels to a hidden city of the dead beneath the plaza. Historians still argue whether these subterranean passages served as literal burial vaults or symbolic entrances to the underworld. The pathway's edges bear scorch marks and soot stains from countless incense processions, each one a plume-laden parade stretching from the central pyramid to the Circle of the Sun. You step lightly over a cluster of these marks, careful not to burn your shoelaces. Joke number 3. Imagine tripping here and turning this into a viral fail video titled "Priest Falls Before Pyramid." The idea makes you grin despite the solemn surroundings. You round a bend and come upon a smaller altar known as the Sun Disk, a circular platform believed to represent the cosmic eye. Pilgrims approached here carrying bundles of copal tied with red ochre-dyed fibers, color symbolism that represented lifeblood and divine flame. Mainstream scholars note that red ochre pigment arrived via long-distance trade routes, as far as present-day Guerrero, evidence of Teotihuacan's extensive economic reach. Historians still argue how those pigments first reached the city through diplomatic gift exchanges, coercive tribute, or underground smuggling rings run by hyper-focused resin aficionados. Above you, scaffolding now supports partial reconstructions of the avenue's edge buildings. Modern conservationists strive to stabilize crumbling stones before they vanish entirely. You wonder if ancient builders ever imagined their work would be propped up by steel beams 2 millennia later. You probably won't offer to volunteer at the next excavation season. Your RSVP would read, "Yes, if there's coffee, but it's a thought." Speaking of coffee, the aroma of freshly ground beans drifts faintly from a nearby visitor center. It's anachronistic, but who are you to judge ancient city-themed lattes? They might even add cinnamon smoke to the menu for authenticity. Historians still argue whether cinnamon ever reached Mesoamerica before colonization, but it's a spicy debate. As you stroll, your fingers brush against carved glyphs, etched into the stone walkway, faded symbols that may represent dates or ceremonial instructions. Mainstream epigraphers have cataloged over 200 glyph fragments, here cross-referencing them with codices from later cultures. Fringe epigraphers claim these carvings include references to lost deities whose names vanished from the historical record. Historians still argue whether those lost gods ever existed or were later inventions by nationalist movements craving ancient origin myths. Midway along the avenue, you spy a group of local vendors setting up small stalls, colorful textiles, and hand-whittled incense burners sell for tourist pesos. You pause, bargain a little, and end up purchasing a miniature replica of the sun disk made from painted clay. Joke number 1, Redux. Now you're a collector of souvenirs just like everyone else. You tuck it into your backpack, promising yourself a place on your living room shelf somewhere between your copy of Ancient Cities for Dummies and that weird cactus plant you keep forgetting to water. Soon the avenue opens onto the Plaza of the Moon, where in mornings past, the Sun Priest led rituals at the complimentary Pyramid of the Moon. You catch a last glimpse of the sun's rays illuminating the pyramid's summit, droplets of sweat tracing lines down your back. It's a sensory mashup, the metallic tang of sweat, the sandy crunch beneath your shoes, and the lingering scent of copal rising from crushed bits underfoot. You inhale deeply and feel teased by the idea that you might witness another ritual here at dusk. Historians still argue whether nightly incense offerings once marked the daily cycle, like spiritual bookends, or if that practice is a modern reimagining by tour operators. Your journey along the processional path comes to an end, as the avenue beds out into open fields once reserved for parades and mass gatherings. You turn back once more, glancing at the distant silhouette of the Pyramid of the Sun, now fully bathed in morning light. Remember that cinnamon debate? It pales compared to the sense of wonder you carry from walking in the footsteps of ancient priests. With your tiny sun disk replica in hand and echoes of incense drifting through your mind, you make your way toward the next stretch of this grand city, ready to uncover what lies beyond the path of smoke and stone. You and the priests gather around a low circular stone altar at the base of the Pyramid of the Sun. No grand fanfare here, just hushed reverence as they lay out ceramic bowls filled with copal blends. You probably won't memorize every ingredient, but the mix includes standard copal resin, bits of crushed pine bark, and a dash of ground aromatic flowers like marigold or passion flower. Mainstream botanical studies confirm that marigold was used in many Mesoamerican rituals for its bright color and mild sedative effect, while passion flower remains a debated inclusion. Historians still argue whether that exotic vine even grew here before trade routes expanded later. A senior priest dips a wooden scoop into one bowl, scooping a fine dust the color of dawn's first blush. He gently shakes it through a woven palm screen, separating larger resin chunks from the powdery mix, an ancient filter that produces uniform smoke. You lean in, catching the fine scent as it drifts upward, sweet, mildly floral, with a hint of pine sap clinging to the back of your throat. Joke number 1, it's like someone blended potpourri with a campfire in a French bakery. Next, the priest arranged cedar wood chips in a shallow iron brazier perched on 3 stone legs. You probably think iron is a misstep. Indeed, mainstream excavations haven't uncovered any iron tools from pre-Hispanic Teotihuacan. Yet fringe theories suggest meteorite iron was repurposed by ritual smiths, forging small tools and braziers, but historians still argue whether those meteorites ever provided sufficient metal to cast workable iron implements. Once the wood is kindled, the master priest commands silence. A deep drumbeat rumbles from a distant courtyard, and the group responds in a low chant. The first handful of copal dust sprouts into flame, and then smolders, sending up a cloud of incense smoke that coils like a lazy serpent in slow motion. You watch as the smoke drifts through carved stone apertures in the altar's rim, intended to direct plumes upward in discrete columns. Mainstream art historians note that some bowls featured as many as 8 apertures, symbolizing the cardinal and intercardinal directions. Fringe commentators speculate that these columns created an early ventilation system to enhance smoke diffusion. Historians still argue whether those holes were functional or purely decorative. With each breath you feel your eyelids grow heavy. The priests wave palm fans in rhythmic arcs, sending meandering spirals of smoke toward the rising sun. You probably won't resist nodding off if this goes on all morning, but maybe that's the point, lulling worshippers into a meditative trance. Sensory detail floods your mind. The silky, warm breeze against your skin, the low hum of voices, the slight crackle of burning resin. Our second joke, you might mistake this for your neighbor's smoky candle Zoom meeting if you're multitasking in bed. Then comes the fringe flourish. One priest dumps a small pouch of powdered cinnabar bright red toxic pigment into the brazier. Historians still argue whether cinnabar sourced from distant mines was used sparingly to add color-laden symbolism of blood and life, or if this story emerged later as dramatic flair. Mainstream evidence finds traces of cinnabar residue on only a handful of ceremonial vessels, suggesting it wasn't a staple ingredient. As the morning sun rises higher, the incense ritual reaches its apex. Priests circulate among the worshippers, allowing each devotee to cup smoke in cupped palms and inhale deeply, a communal rite symbolizing shared communion with the divine. You lean forward, palms open, and draw in the fragrant cloud. It wraps around your senses, softening the world into a gentle hush broken only by distant bird calls. Our third joke, you probably won't get a lungful of this without coughing, but hey, it makes a good story for your next cough drop ad. After a final chant, the priests extinguish the brazier and collect leftover ashes, placing them into small cloth bundles. These ashes will be scattered at the city's 4 cardinal entrances at dusk, completing the daily ritual loop. Mainstream ritual reconstructions confirm this dusk delivery, framing the day like ceremonial bookends, while an alternate theory suggests the ashes were used as talismans against disease. Historians still argue whether they held healing powers or served purely symbolic roles. With the altar stripped clean, you step away, legs faint from standing, and head pleasantly woozy. You've seen how the sun priest's incense rites bind the city to its solar heartbeat, an aromatic performance etched in memory and carved into stone. Ahead, the Avenue of the Dead glows in the morning light, beckoning you onward. But for now, you pause, still savoring that last tendril of incense smoke as it drifts skyward, dissolving into the abyss between earth and sun. You stand close to the altar's edge as a junior priest kneels before a pile of carefully stacked copal chunks, arranging them like miniature stepping stones leading to a small bed of glowing charcoal. You probably won't achieve that perfect ember balance on your first try. Junior priests train for weeks to master spark timing, but you watch every deliberate movement. Mainstream accounts note that the first ember ignition was scheduled precisely at 6 a.m. solar time, marked by a double conch shell blast. Fringe reconstructions suggest an earlier secret hour existed when only the highest-ranking priests could kindle the flame. Historians still argue whether that hidden ceremony really took place or was invented by later storytellers. The brazier's charcoal glows faintly before the priest leans in, shielding the embers from a sudden breeze. With a carved obsidian tongs sharp enough to split resin nuggets in two, he places the first chunk of copal atop the coals. You hear a soft crackle as the resin gasifies, releasing a faint glow at its edges before bursting into bright orange flame. The scent shifts instantly. Sweet resin transforms into a deeper, honeyed smoke with hints of charred wood. Joke number 1. You probably wish your morning coffee smelled this divine, though it wouldn't catch fire on your desk. A chorus of wooden rattles begins a low syncopated rhythm echoing through the plaza as other priests circle the brazier. Their chant rises in a spiraling cadence, chitsa chitsa, an invocation whose precise translation remains debated, but likely references the sun's life-giving power. Mainstream ethno-historians translate it as, "We call you creator of day," while a competing school reads it as, "Breathe through this smoke, O spirit." Historians still argue which aligns with original glyphic inscriptions found on a nearby mural. You lean closer, catching the ember's first bright flare as it ignites the resin's volatile oils. The flames dance over the copal's uneven surface, sending molten drips down onto cooler coals below. Each droplet bursts into wisps of fragrant smoke, coalescing into white spirals that loft skyward. Sensory detail floods your mind, the gentle heat at your cheeks, the spicy sweet aroma weaving through your hair, the dull roar of flames against the plaza's stone hush. And in that moment, you feel connected, not merely witnessing, but participating in an elemental exchange of fire and resin. Fringe sources claim that priests occasionally added ground anthracite dust to accelerate the burn, creating brief but spectacular flame bursts meant to simulate solar flares. Historians still argue whether any archaeological residue supports this dramatic flourish. You scan the brazier's rim for black flecks, but see only the familiar golden-orange faces of half-melted copal nuggets. As the primary flame stabilizes, the master priest steps forward, plucking a single feather from his headdress and dipping its tip in scented water. He flicks droplets onto the flame's edge, sending hissing tendrils of steam that mingle with the smoke. This action, mainstream scholars agree, symbolized the union of water and fire, two elemental forces tamed to serve divine purpose. Yet some argue this step was a theatrical addition by colonial chroniclers seeking to dramatize Mesoamerican rituals. Historians still argue whether water dipping was standard across all temples or a regional innovation at Teotihuacan alone. You watch as the smoke plume thickens, rising in a single pillar at first, before spreading into a broad fan that arcs toward the pyramid's summit. The brazier sits within a shallow cleft carved into the plaza's central platform. From here, smoke billows directly up the pyramid's stairway, visible from miles away in all directions. Joke number 2, it's like nature's own lighthouse. Except instead of warning ships, it signals to the sun god, "We're awake, shine on us." Children of priestly families press against the altar's edge, faces wide-eyed as they witness the flame's birth. Their playful whispers drift to you. It's like fire-born incense. Modern asides remind you that Teotihuacan's youth likely saw this ritual annually, yet you'd be hard-pressed to find many modern-day 10-year-olds who'd rise before dawn just to watch a brazier ignite. Instagram, anyone you think picturing the perfect slow-mo smoke shot, except with no cell service and definitely no hashtags. Once the brazier smolders steadily, the gathered priests shift to fanning rhythms, each palm fan stroke sending ripples through the smoke. You feel the gentle breeze created by their coordinated movement, just enough to brush stray dust from your neck. The chant transitions to a higher pitch as the flames flicker at the resin's heart, as if the fire itself responds to their voices. Mainstream performance scholars note that such synchronized actions fostered communal cohesion, a living metaphor for the city's unity under solar worship. Historians still argue whether this was a conscious psychological tool or simply ritual tradition. You inhale deeply, letting the resin's fragrant haze fill your lungs. The warmth spreads through your chest and out to your fingertips, leaving a soft tingle that invites your eyes to droop. Sensory trick. The combination of heat rhythm and sweet smoke lulls the mind into a gentle trance, blurring the edge between wakefulness and reverie. Joke number 3, you probably won't remember this moment by tonight, but your dreams might, especially if you inhale too deeply and find yourself sniffing your pillow later. As the sun climbs higher, the flame's edge softens into glowing embers, and the smoke fan widens, drifting lazily toward the city's eastern gate. Priests begin their sunrise procession carrying the brazier on a stone dais toward waiting worshippers. You step back blinking against the bright sky, watching the ceremonial flame move like a sleeping sun among the living stones. In that fleeting tableau, fire resin and human devotion merge into a single ritual heartbeat, one that has echoed through Teotihuacan's dawns for nearly 2 millennia. You follow the curling smoke plume as it drifts across the plaza, its tendrils catching in the early light like pale ribbons unfurling toward the sun. You probably won't decode its silent message incense, as divine language was central to Teotihuacan's ritual lexicon, believed to carry thoughts skyward, but historians still argue over its literal function. Mainstream interpretations hold that smoke symbolized the breath of the gods, forging an invisible bridge between mortal and celestial realms. Fringe researchers, however, propose that these plumes carried encoded chemical signals subtly influencing participants' moods. Historians still argue whether these theories rest on chemical analysis or wishful thinking. Venturing closer, you see how the smoke skirts a low relief carved into the plaza's stones, a stylized quetzal bird perched atop a spiral glyph. Priests interpreted this motif as the winged messenger, a familiar symbol in Mesoamerican art, linking avian flight with divine communication. You crouch to trace the worn grooves with a fingertip. Its edges are surprisingly smooth, worn by centuries of pilgrim footsteps. Joke number 1, you probably won't get calluses from this pilgrimage, but your palm prints might end up as fodder for the next tourist infographic. As the smoke drifts upward, a hush falls over the gathered crowd. You notice worshippers cupping their hands, wafting the incense toward their faces in small gusts. These individual gestures form a collective pantomime reinforcing communal belief. Mainstream anthropologists label this embodied ritual where simple movements synchronize group consciousness. Yet some scholars argue that such motions originated as practical tests, ensuring the smoke wasn't harmful before inviting children and the elderly to participate. Historians still argue whether the gesture's genesis was symbolic or pragmatic. Above you, the plume thickens and fans out, revealing subtle color gradations. At its base, the smoke glows bright white. Higher up, it shifts to pale gold before dissolving into near transparency. Sensory detail hits you. The gradient feels like tasting a layered dessert. Joke number 2. Imagine a 3-tiered smoke souffle minus the calories. You tilt your head back, letting the delicate aroma envelop you. Notes of pine mingle with hints of floral sweetness, like walking through a candle shop in a forest clearing. You turn to the Scholar's Mound, an elevated platform where scribes once recorded ritual outcomes on thin strips of amate bark. According to mainstream accounts, scribes documented the length, density, and direction of smoke plumes to interpret divine favor. Fringe speculation suggests they also cataloged subtle wind shifts to predict agricultural yields. Historians still argue whether these records served as meteorological forecasts or spiritual omens. Stepping onto the mound, you find a carved basin once used to collect fallen resin crumbs. Archaeologists have identified residue of at least 3 distinct copal varieties here, underscoring the priest's penchant for complex incense blends. You dip a finger into the residue, damp, grainy, and surprisingly cool. The texture feels like soft sandpaper against your skin. Joke number 3, you probably won't sand your furniture with this, but you could exfoliate your face if you're brave. From this vantage, you watch the smoke ribbons stretch across the plaza, reaching toward the pyramid of the sun's summit. The wind shifts and trails of translucent haze drift southward toward the residential compounds. Legend holds these plumes offer daily blessings to families, cleansing living spaces of spiritual residue. Mainstream ethnographers note similar practices in later Nahua cultures, But historians still argue whether Teotihuacan's version directly influenced Aztec customs or emerged independently, a debate smoky enough to cloud any clear conclusion. You step back down and navigate between standing stones carved with solar discs. One disc bears a strange anomaly, concentric circles etched extra deeply on one quadrant. Fringe theorists claim this marks the moment of a solar eclipse observed around 150 CE, a cosmic event recorded only in oral tradition. Historians still argue whether this carving commemorates an eclipse or simply the artisan's aesthetic whim. As the ritual wind blows, you catch fleeting scraps of chant, lilting voices intoning prayers to Tonatiuh, the sun god. Mainstream sources translate these as pleas for warmth and plenty, but some contend they contain coded requests for political favors. Historians still argue whether temple petitions doubled as bureaucratic memos. You lean in, imagining a world where smoke and speech merged into a single petition carried aloft on resin-laced breezes toward the ears of distant deities. A stray breeze flips your hair across your face, carrying a swirl of soot that tickles your cheek. You brush it away, recalling the fringe comment that priests sometimes shrouded their faces in burnt copal dust to mask emotions during solemn rites. Historians still argue whether these masks were practical to shield eyes from smoke or purely theatrical. Standing here, you appreciate how every aspect of the ceremony sounds sight-scent, wove together into an immersive tapestry of devotion. The plaza around you hums with quiet activity. Attendants refill braziers, pilgrims exchange whispered reflections, and children chase lingering smoke trails like playful sprites. You inhale one last deep breath of incense-scented air before turning away. The divine language of smoke has spoken its morning sermon, its words drifting back down through cloudless skies to caress your skin. As you stride toward the next secret of Teotihuacan's sunrise rites, you carry that silent sermon in your lungs, a fragrant whisper of devotion that lingers long after the ashes cool. You pause at the edge of a low stone bench where faint chalk marks hint at an ancient gathering spot. This was likely the smoke gallery where priests observed how incense behavior reflected cosmic patterns. You probably won't get a PhD in smoky calculus, but you're about to witness its basics in action. Mainstream scholars note that priests measured smoke density against sunrise angles to decide planting dates. Fringe researchers argue they also tracked micro-eddies to predict rainfall. Historians still argue whether these observations were scientific foresight or ritual theater. Settling onto the bench, you watch as a priest places a flat disc-shaped bowl atop 4 tiny obsidian legs. Inside, he arranges concentric rings of copal granules, each ring representing a calendar division. He lights the outermost ring first, and as that burns down to ignite the next, an intricate sequence of smoke pulses emerges. Sensory detail fills your senses, the crackling of resin, the soft hiss as granules ignite in sequence, and the smoky tendrils drifting upward in timed intervals. Joke number 1. It's like ancient fireworks engineered for sleep rather than spectacle. The first ring's plume rises straight, steady, and unbroken, indicating auspicious weather, according to mainstream codices. Priests murmur affirmations. Clear skies, abundant fields. Next, the second ring sputters, sending smoke in jagged bursts. Fringe interpretations call this the tiger's breath, signaling potential droughts or solar flares. Historians still argue whether such metaphors held literal predictive power or were poetic license. You lean forward, inhaling the layered aroma, pine sharpness balanced by floral sweetness undercut by a smoky undertone that reminds you of campfire marshmallows. Joke number 2. If only someone handed out s'mores here, though that might distract from crop predictions. As each ring burns away, the timing between smoke releases is noted by scribes seated on nearby steps, frantically scratching translations onto amate bark strips. Modern asides, Question how accurately those scribes recorded the timings. Did they use simple sundials, or did they rely on gut instinct? Historians still argue how precise these smoke measurements truly were. When the final ring ignites, a delicate mist of smoke rises in a perfect spiral, lingering longer than the previous pulses. Priests raise their arms in quiet triumph, an omen of balanced seasons and plentiful harvests. You clap softly, careful not to disrupt the solemn atmosphere. Joke number 3, you probably won't get points for dramatic flair, but your enthusiasm is noted. Above, light filters through wispy clouds, casting moving shadows that blend with the incense haze. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the complex sensory tableau wash over you, the rhythm of burning rings, the chorus of murmured prayers, and the tactile coolness of the stone beneath you. Historians still argue whether this smoke gallery practice was unique to Teotihuacan, or part of a broader Mesoamerican tradition, so pick your camp before you bet on the next academic panel. As the last embers wink out, the priest gathers the empty bowl and steps away, tossing residual ash into a small clay pot. You rise too, shoulders humming from the bench's rough stone surface, and follow the procession of incense smoke analysts back toward the main plaza. With every step, the lingering traces of aromatic wisdom cling to your senses, a layered ritual legacy that continues to shape life beyond Teotihuacan's fallen walls. You step aside from the swirling incense haze to a side altar, where offerings beyond copal rest in hopeful arrays, bright marigolds, gleaming jade discs, and small bowls of blood from ceremonial self-cutting. You probably won't volunteer for the bloodletting yourself. Novice priests typically pricked their earlobes or left tiny nicks on their calves to honor the sun's life force, but you can't help but feel a shiver as you survey these vivid gifts. Mainstream records confirm that Teotihuacan offerings included botanical tributes like marigold flowers and maize stalks symbolizing fertility and renewal, while jade imported from the Motagua Valley represented eternity and divine favor. Fringe accounts insist priestly elites also offered hummingbird hearts to intensify solar communion. Historians still argue whether such visceral gifts were widespread or limited to elite tombs. A priest waves away drifting smoke and leans forward, plucking a handful of marigold petals. He scatters them over a jade mask, an abstract visage carved with looping glyphs believed to channel ancestral spirits. The petals land like sunlit rain, their scent a faintly citrusy sweetness that contrasts with the resinous incense. Joke number 1, you probably won't find marigold-flavored cotton candy at the next county fair, but here it's a fragrant sacrament. To your left, an assistant pours a small trickle of blood into a shallow stone bowl, the liquid pooling like dawn's first light. Mainstream ethno-historical sources note that bloodletting served as an intimate pledge of human sacrifice, a personal offering of life's essence. Yet fringe theories propose that priests collected the blood to mix with copal for a living. Incense blend historians still argue whether any chemical analysis supports the presence of human biomarkers in ancient resin samples. You lean closer to inspect a string of jade beads threaded through a delicate cord of braided cotton. Each bead bears a small carved sun motif, and you imagine the labor required to drill those tiny holes, likely done with an obsidian drill and sand abrasion. Modern asides marvel that even today jade carving remains a painstaking craft, making you appreciate the priest's dedication. Joke number 2, you probably won't sit through a 5-hour jade bead workshop, but these artisans did and without YouTube tutorials. Beside the jade tokens sits a polished conch shell trumpet, its spiral whorls etched with solar symbols. Mainstream archaeologists have found these shells along the Gulf Coast, confirming long-distance trade networks that funneled exotic goods into Teotihuacan. Fringe enthusiasts claim the shells once held shimmering inks made from crushed emeralds. Historians still argue whether any green pigment residue survives among the carved designs. A hush descends as the master priest lifts the conch to his lips and blows a single resonant blast. The sound ripples through the plaza, carrying a brassy echo that intertwines with the incense smoke. You probably won't mistake it for your morning alarm. Its tone is deeper, more mournful, like the world itself exhaling, but it jolts you upright, mind and body alert. Sensory detail floods you the vibration in your chest. The cool air funneled through the shell and the faint tickle of marigold pollen on your tongue. Now comes the fringe flourish beside the shell. You notice small obsidian blades stained a dark red. These were once dipped in chili extract according to some fringe sources to slice brief shallow cuts on participants' tongues. Historians still argue whether those blades carried any botanical irritants or if the color simply came from hematite paint. Mainstream excavations recovered similar blades near temple entrances, yet no chemical traces have confirmed chili use in ritual lacerations. A group of acolytes steps forward, each one placing a small ceramic bowl on the altar's edge. You peer inside and see offerings of atole, a warm maize drink sweetened with honey and spiced with ground cacao. Mainstream cookpots from Teotihuacan confirm that cacao, while rare, was consumed by elites during special ceremonies. Fringe commentators argue that caffeine from cacao provided early priestly energy boosts during dawn rites. Historians still argue whether any stimulating effect was intentional or merely a fortunate side effect. The master priest motions to you, inviting you to take a marigold petal and drop it into one of the bowls. You comply, the petal floating atop the milky atoll like a bright star in a tiny galaxy. You lift the bowl to your lips and sip. The drink coats your mouth with sweet, earthy warmth, cinnamon hints tickling your palate. Joke number 3, you probably won't win any barista awards, but in this moment, you're one with ancient sacramental coffee minus the caffeine crash later. As the offerings accumulate, flowers, drifting beads, shimmering droplets of blood darkening the altar becomes a vivid mosaic of devotion. Each gift carries layered symbolism: marigolds for life's brightness, jade for immortal favor, blood for the human spark, bridging flesh and sky. You step back, watching priests gently stir the atole mix petals into jade bowls and anoint shoulders with drops of incense-infused water. Mainstream ritual reconstructions suggest these combined offerings formed a multi-sensory prayer, while alternate theories propose they sought to mimic cosmic abundance. Historians still argue whether this was codified theology or emergent tradition. With the ritual's climax reached, priests gather the jade tokens, marigold garlands, and leftover atole to distribute among the city's districts. You receive a single jade disc tied to your wrist, its cool heft a reminder of your fleeting connection to Teotihuacan's dawn ceremonies. As you slip it under your sleeve, the plaza buzzes with whispered anticipation for the next rite, the echoing of conch horns, the deference of pilgrims, and the silent promise that, even beyond incense, devotion finds countless ways to ascend skyward. You step into the shadowed courtyard behind the main pyramid, where the morning's incense smoke drifts through a series of stone arches, creating whispered echoes. You probably won't hear a better natural ASMR track than this. Each plume's hiss blends with your own breath and the soft clatter of priestly sandals. Mainstream archaeologists confirm these courtyards were designed to amplify ritual sounds using angled walls and recessed niches. Fringe acousticians argue they intentionally tuned the chambers to solar frequencies. Historians still argue whether any precise solar note was targeted, or if the echoes were a happy architectural accident. At the courtyard's center, a semicircle of priests kneels before low flat stones, each one topped with a small conch shell trumpet. You recognize the spiraled shells from earlier offerings, but now they serve as instruments of sonic invocation. You crouch behind a fluted column, curious whether the shell's tone varies with each priest's breath. Joke number one, you probably won't find tutorial videos teaching how to play conch shell 101, but here it's second nature. The lead trumpeter lifts her shell and exhales. A mellow call resonates a deep, brassy note that vibrates through your chest like a whispered heartbeat. Seconds later, a second priest answers, creating a haunting duet that ripples across the courtyard. Mainstream ethnomusicologists label this call and response style a spiritual dialogue between priest and deity, while fringe theorists assert the varying pitch patterns encoded calendrical data. Historians still argue whether these tonal sequences matched ritual dates or were improvised for effect. As the shell calls fade, the priests rise in unison and begin a low chant, sitis, an echo of the earlier tsitsa invocation, but stretched into a deep, resonant drone. The chant's vibrations sway through the courtyard air, mingling with the last wisps of a copal smoke that cling to carved reliefs on the walls. Sensory detail floods you, the bass hum against your ribs, the smoky scent swirling in your hair, and the cool stone pressing against your knees. Joke number two. You probably won't get a better neck massage than that natural bass vibration, but no spa reservation can match this ancient sound bath. Between chant lines, priests snap small wooden rattles, their staccato taps framing the drone like punctuation. You lean in, watching each flick of the wrist as seeds inside the rattles jingle like distant rain. Mainstream sources note similar rattles were used across Mesoamerica for timekeeping and rituals. Fringe commentators propose they imitated thunder's rhythm to summon seasonal rains. Historians still argue whether these symbols had meteorological meaning or purely spiritual resonance. Behind the semicircle, sunlight trickles through a narrow slit in the stone roof, spotlighting a carved glyph. A coiled serpent crowned with solar discs. Priests lifted their gaze to follow the serpent's carved body as their chant crescendoed, symbolizing the sun's journey across the sky. You track the light's path, noticing how it, like the smoke, traces an arc that aligns with the courtyard's axis. Joke number three, it's like nature's own follow-the-dot game, except your prize is spiritual enlightenment rather than candy. As the chant reaches its apex, all sound abruptly cuts off. Silence falls in a hush so deep, it feels physical, pressing against your eardrums. In that void, you sense the courtyard itself holding its breath, the smoke now dispersed into motes of pale light. Priests close their shells and drop their rattles, kneeling in complete stillness. You swallow, realizing even your heartbeat seems too loud for this hallowed pause. After a respectful interval, the master priest nods once and the circle opens. Priests file out past you, each releasing a final, soft shell call as they leave. You stand, brushing dust from your knees, the echoes lingering long after the last note. In that courtyard of stone and smoke and sound, you felt how Teotihuacan's incense rituals wove together sight scent and sonic waves into a unified tapestry of devotion and echo chamber, not just of stone, but of belief itself. You're led to a quieter alcove where priests sift through the morning's spent ashes residue from copal cedar and any fringe additives like cinnabar dust. You probably won't think of ash as treasure, but here it holds hidden secrets of the rite's potency. Mainstream archaeologists have identified ash samples containing microscopic resin particles, pollen grains, and occasional flecks of crushed mineral pigments. Fringe analysts claim these varied constituents formed to code each pollen type and pigment ratio, signaling specific ritual outcomes. Historians still argue whether these ash codes were practical records or poetic inventions. A senior priest kneels over a shallow stone trough and scoops a handful of fine gray powder into a palm-sized bowl. He examines it under the rising sun, letting warm rays illuminate tiny shimmering particles. Sensory detail surrounds you, the faint metallic tang of cinnabar remnants, the dusty scent of charred wood, and a whisper of pine still clinging to molecules embedded in the ash. Joke number one, you probably won't use this as face powder, but some modern influencers might applaud the ancient exfoliant trend. He then sprinkles the ash over a grid drawn in red ochre on the trough's bottom, an open-air ash lab where shapes in the powder translate to divine messages. Mainstream reconstructions show priests watching for how ash drifts and settles smooth layers promised fertility, while jagged patterns signaled impending turmoil. Fringe scholars argue that priests measured ash conductivity to predict weather shifts. Historians still argue whether electrostatic readings ever featured in these ancient divinations. You crouch beside the priest, peering into the ash grid. The fine powder swirls as the wind picks up slightly, forming faint concentric rings. The priest murmurs, "Fertile earth returns, sealing a blessing for the planting season." Modern asides remind you that such ash divination practices persist among contemporary indigenous communities, though often repurposed as tourist demonstrations rather than genuine rites. Historians still argue whether today's rituals faithfully mirror ancient ceremonies or represent revived interpretations. Next, the priest scoops another small bowl of ash and mixes it with water in a groove carved into the trough's side, creating a thick paste. He dips a feather fan into the paste and fans the mixture onto his own robes, leaving swirling white patterns against his crimson-dyed linen. The act transforms his garment into a living canvas of divine signage. Mainstream textile experts note that ash-based paints were common in Mesoamerican ceremonies, valued for their ease of preparation and gentle washability. Fringe theorists claim some robes carried hidden glyphic codes revealed only through ash staining. Historians still argue whether these washed-off patterns were ever more than decorative marks. You lean closer, noting how the paste's texture glistens in the sun, tiny resin crystals catching light like stars in a twilight sky. Joke number 2, you probably won't see such sparkle in modern face paint, but ancient priests enjoyed a cosmic shimmer. The aroma shifts too, the ash water bland at first, then releasing a subtle backnote of copal as it dries. You inhale through your nose, tasting the ceremony's residue on the air. From behind, attendants bring forward clay vessels filled with water. Priests ladle clear water over the ash-marked robes, washing away paste and leaving faint white glyphs behind. These residual patterns become part of the priest's ritual record, documented later on amate strips. Mainstream conservationists have uncovered similar glyph impressions on textiles preserved in tombs, supporting the notion that ash wash patterns held. GE historians still argue whether those impressions were intended as permanent inscriptions or temporary ceremonial flourishes. You step back as priests gather the cleaned ash and place it into a woven basket lined with cactus fiber cloth. These ashes will later be scattered at 4 cardinal points of the city at dusk, sealing the morning's ritual with a symbolic return to earth. Sensory notes. The ash basket feels oddly warm, as though it still holds a trace of the fire's heat. Joke number 3, you probably won't keep it in your living room, but local guides might hand you tiny vials labeled Teotihuacan dust for sale. Before you depart the alcove, a priest invites you to take a pinch of the ash mix. You hesitantly press it between fingertips, feeling a grainy tickle. He nods solemnly, an invitation to share in the final stage of divination. You sprinkle the ash onto the back of your hand, watching as fine patterns emerge where your skin's oils resist or absorb powder. Mainstream ethnographers would call this a participatory ritual, bonding visitors to the ceremony. Fringe commentators suggest it mimicked sacrificial offerings as though your body became an altar. Historians still argue whether such guest inclusion rites were widely practiced or reserved for elite participants. As you leave the alcove, the residual scent of ash and resin lingers in your nostrils. You carry both physical and intangible remnants of the ritual. A small clay bowl of ash and a membrane in your mind filled with symbolic patterns. Walking back into the plaza's sun-drenched open space, you feel reoriented. Ash, once mere residue, now stands between earth and sky, a silent messenger compressing centuries of Teotihuacan belief into each fine grain. You find yourself before the partially collapsed northern temple, its weathered steps still stained with traces of morning incense ashes from centuries past. You probably won't witness an original ritual here. This structure fell into ruin around 650 CE, but you can sense how the sun priest's flame once crowned this lofty platform. Mainstream stratigraphy dates the collapse to internal strife during Teotihuacan's decline, while fringe theorists blame seismic activity sparked by a solar-aligned earthquake. Historians still argue whether human conflict or natural disaster delivered the final blow. Climbing the remaining stones, you skirt crumbling walls where faint soot marks outline previous brazier placements. A senior priest gestures to a shallow niche carved into the platform's edge. Here, small braziers once burned copal continuously from dawn until the sun's zenith. You peek inside and find a modern replica brazier already smoldering with fresh resin. Joke number one, you probably won't replace your morning candle ritual with this, but it's hard to beat for authenticity. Ahead, two priests set up a tall, four-armed stone lamp bearer, its arms capped with circular indentations designed to hold bowls of mixed incense. Mainstream historians interpret this as a multi-phase offering station, allowing simultaneous burning of varied copal blends. Fringe reconstructions propose each arm represented a cardinal direction, so burning different resins symbolized a unified cosmic watch. Historians still argue whether directional symbolism or practical supplementation drove this multi-arm design. You step closer as they ignite the first bowl on the east arm. Wisps of smoke curl around the carved sun disk at the lamp-bearer's center, drifting toward the city's main gate. Sensory detail floods your senses, the sharp tang of copal mixed with cedar smoke, the gentle warmth washing over your face, and the drone of a distant funeral flute, an instrument used to mourn the sun's daily descent. Joke number two, you probably won't RSVP mourning the sunset on your calendar, but here it's a daily club. Then comes the fringe flourish. One priest drops a pinch of powdered turquoise into the fire, hoping to produce a green-hued smoke cloud, an effect supposedly invoking the promise of ripening maize fields. Mainstream residues seldom show turquoise in ash samples, yet a few high-status burials contained turquoise artifacts indicating its ceremonial value. Historians still argue whether turquoise smoke was ever real, or a later myth spun by storytellers craving colorful drama. Smoke pillars rise from each arm in balanced columns forming a ghostly ring around the lamp-bearer. The priests step back and begin a low, synchronized chant that builds into a crescendo, their voices resonating against ancient stone. You join their circle, palms turned upward, and feel the heat of the braziers at your fingertips. Joke number three, you probably won't host your next dinner party around a four-armed incense lamp, but this might inspire a modern home decor trend, ancient meso chic. As the ring of smoke expands, you notice tiny motes of ash drifting like snowflakes, a delicate reminder that even fire yields to gravity. Priests collect these motes in clay dishes, then press them into small clay seals, stamped with the city's emblem, the intertwined sun and moon. Mainstream archaeology has uncovered similar seals used to certify ritual completion, while some fringe experts believe these seals doubled as talismans against enemy spies. Historians still argue whether they serve security purposes or simple ritual markers. From this vantage, you survey the ruins below the Avenue of the Dead, threading through the morning haze flanked by plumes that still rise from distant braziers. The synchronized smoke rings you've helped create echo across time, embodying the Sun Priest's ancient mandate to bridge earth and sky in fragrant communion. As you step away from the lamp bearer, the combined scent of cedar copal and a whisper of turquoise dust lingers on your skin, a final, fragrant trace of dawn's incense rites. You cross the modern walkway built to guide visitors past ongoing excavations, where scaffolding and protective nets guard rediscovered chambers beneath the Plaza of the Moon. You probably won't glimpse the hidden archives here. Most finds remain sealed for preservation. But archaeologists have unearthed chiseled reliefs depicting late-stage incense offerings. Mainstream reports confirm 19th-century explorers first documented these reliefs during early digs cataloging over 200 glyph panels near the Sun Temple's base. Fringe enthusiasts claim those explorers also spotted alchemical symbols etched between glyphs. Historians still argue whether those markings were genuine or later graffiti from opportunistic settlers. Along the walkway, informational plaques recount Teotihuacan's rediscovery in the 1850s by a Franciscan friar who stumbled upon buried staircases. You read how subsequent excavations in the 1960s revealed intact braziers and offering bowls, mainstream breakthroughs that reshaped Mesoamerican chronology. Joke number 1. You probably won't wander into an ancient tomb on your way to the gift shop. But these early archaeologists did unplanned cave tours included. Behind glass panels, you observe a pristine copal burner excavated in 1972. Its footed base and smoke vents identical to the replicas you've seen in ritual reenactments. Fringe commentators argue that microscopic residue on its rim contains traces of unknown compounds suggesting lost ingredients from early priestly recipes. Historians still argue whether advanced chemical analyses can reliably identify those ancient additives or fall prey to modern contamination. You step into a reconstructed courtyard where living practitioners perform dawn incense ceremonies inspired by Teotihuacan's heritage. Robed in linen dyed with traditional ochre pigments, they follow protocols drawn from codex fragments. Mainstream scholars applaud their fidelity to documented rites, while some insist these performances smooth over complex details to cater to tourism. Historians still argue whether modern revivals capture authentic spirit or simplified spectacle. A Fringe reenactor holds aloft a small obsidian censer, claiming it's modeled exactly on one found in a 1979 burial chamber. She flicks it open to reveal simulated copal dust blended with herbs like sage and lavender, anachronistic but evocative. You inhale the hybrid aroma, sensing how contemporary creativity intertwines with ancient tradition. Joke number 2, you probably won't find lavender in a 2,000-year-old recipe, but this mix smells like cultural mashup in a bottle. Nearby, a display case features interactive screens showing 3D scans of pyramid interiors. You swipe through layers of stone, tracing tunnels priests once navigated in initiation rites. Mainstream technologists praise these digital reconstructions for public education. Yet Fringe critics warn VR tours can distort scale and atmosphere. Historians still argue whether virtual experiences deepen understanding or dilute the mystery. As you exit into the afternoon sun, you pause at a modest shrine where locals silently ignite copal sticks, an offering continuity stretching from ancient dawns to present dusk. The scent of resin mingles with city exhaust and street food smoke, a sensory tapestry of past and present. You probably won't witness a more poignant fusion of eras here. The Sun Priest's legacy flickers on in every hand-rolled incense stick and whispered prayer. You linger at the summit of the Pyramid of the Sun as the last plumes of incense curl skyward, their golden threads dissolving into the blue expanse. You probably won't see a more fitting finale. This is where the Sun Priest's morning rites reach their quiet denouement, and you, an unlikely pilgrim, now stand shoulder to shoulder with ancient devotion. The wind is softer up here, carrying only the faintest whisper of street noise from modern Teotihuacan below, reminding you that even sacred spaces evolve. A final ember glows at the center of the marble brazier, its heat gentle against your fingertips when you lean forward. Mainstream texts describe this ember as the heart of the sun, symbolizing the living spark that animates both deity and devotee. Fringe legends claim that priests once coaxed this ember to flicker in perfect sync with the human heartbeat, forging a mystical empathic bond. Historians still argue whether any ritual drum or pulse device achieves such synchronization or if it's merely poetic legend. You kneel beside the master priest who reaches into a woven basket and selects a single large copal chunk. He places it reverently on the ember, and for a moment the brazier bursts into a gentle flare. The flame's hue warms from bright orange to deep gold, as though cradling a miniature sunrise in its glow. Sensory detail washes over you, the sudden rush of heat under your chin, the rich honeyed smoke that shifts from citrus sharpness to mellow sweetness, and the low hum of priestly chants fading into soft exhalations. Joke number 1. You probably won't replace your morning candle ritual with this dramatic flair, but it would make an unforgettable Instagram story if only there were cell service up here. As the flare subsides back to coals, the priests rise in unison and form a silent circle around the brazier. Each holds a single palm frond, its green fronds shimmering with morning dew. They dip the fronds into a basin of scented water, this time infused with crushed marigold petals, and gently wave them through the smoke. Mainstream reconstructions suggest water-infused fronds cooled both priests and participants, while fringe theories propose the floral infusion carried symbolic messages of rebirth. Historians still argue whether this step served practical comfort or rich allegory. You stand and join the circle, raising your own frond as instructed. The dew-laced leaves brush lightly against your palm, cool and almost ticklish. Together you sway in a measured rhythm, the fronds stirring the remaining smoke into a luminous haze that bathes the summit in a golden veil. Sensory detail, the soft rustle of leaves, the brush's sensation against your forearm, and the warm, slightly damp air imprinted with resin's sweet aroma. Joke number 2, you probably won't get this kind of spa treatment at your local wellness center, but ancient priests enjoyed it before brunch. The circle completes 3 slow rotations, enough to honor the sun's path from horizon to zenith, and then stops. In the hush that follows, the brazier is gently tapped with a ceremonial mallet carved from a cedars, extinguishing the embers with a muffled thud. You feel the vibration through the soles of your feet, a grounding echo after the day's lofty rituals. Mainstream sources call this the closing strike, marking the end of morning intercession. Fringe commentators claim it mimics the heartbeat of the earth itself. Historians still argue whether any acoustic intent underlies this soft percussion, or if it evolved from practical ash containment. You step forward, guided by the master priest, to sprinkle a final handful of cooled coals into a low grate built into the summit's edge. Each coal drops with a soft crack, sending muted puffs of steam into the now still air. The grate channels coals away to an underground chamber, once reserved for sacred storage, an echo of the underworld's womb, where spiritual energy rests until dusk's reversal. Mainstream interpretations view this as a cyclical ritual closure. Fringe tales insist some coal bits were hidden among royal tombs to maintain divine favor after death. Historians still argue whether any such coal relics survive, or were symbolic blessings offered to departed souls. The assembled priests bow deeply, linen robes brushing stone, and the master priest turns to you. He extends his hand, offering a small clay cup containing the brazier's final dribble of resin-infused water. You raise it to your lips and sip. The liquid is surprisingly warm, sweet, with copal's essence and hints of flower oil linger on your tongue. It's the ritual's last taste, a communion that binds you to centuries of dawn devotion. Joke number 3. You probably won't find this beverage on any cafe menu, but it's the purest morning pick-me-up imaginable. The master priest then scatters the cup's remnants over the city's 4 corners in quick measured arcs, east, southwest, north. With each arc, a tiny spray of water and resin rains down on Teotihuacan's sleeping dwellings, blessing them with morning's final benediction. You follow suit, your own sprinkles falling like golden dew on the plaza stones below. In this fleeting act, you join the timeless cycle earth to sky, sky to earth devotion, exchanged in scent and dew. As the circle dissolves, sunlight fully illuminates the summit and the plaza below gleams with fresh offerings in every brazier. You step back, breathing deeply, letting the morning's rituals settle in your bones. The sun priest's dawn incense rites have ended, not with a roar but a whisper. Coals cooled smoke dispersed, sacred water scattered. All that remains is memory and lingering fragrance carried on the breeze. Now let your thoughts drift as softly as the fading incense smoke. You breathe in the quiet, calm senses softened by amber light and distant murmurs of a city stirring to life. Each inhalation carries the sweetness of copal, blended with dew-kissed petals, grounding you in the moment's gentle embrace. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy, the day's vivid rituals receding like waves pulling back from the shore. Feel the warmth of stone beneath your fingertips still holding echoes of flame, and let every muscle relax. With each exhale, release the weight of expectation. There is nowhere to rush, nothing more to achieve right now. Picture yourself sinking into a plush cushion atop the pyramid, wrapped in linen robes, scented faintly of sunrise. A hush blankets the world, and all that remains is the soft hum of memory, the crackle of copal, the hiss of petals on embers, the echo of conch calls blending with the wind. As your breathing slows, know that the ancients shared this moment, a sunrise ritual not to wake the body, but to cradle the spirit. Inhale peace. Exhale curiosity. Let your dreams be suffused with golden mist and distant drums, guiding you through silent caverns lit by ember glow. Soon you'll drift beyond waking thoughts into gentle slumber, carried by the sun priest's final blessing, wrapped in fragrant reverie. Good night, and may your dreams rise like incense light and drifting, carrying you to restful dawns yet to come.